Hi everyone, we're on question 10 of the free math practice test for HiSet, and it's form FPT-6A. Question number 10 has a parabola in it. So it looks a lot like a previous question that we worked with, except now what they're wanting us to do with it, instead of finding the vertex, which would be right here, what they're wanting us to do is determine the rate of change. The question says the function of y is equal to the function y equals the function of x is graphed in the standard xy coordinate plane as shown. Which of the following values is the average rate of change of the function from x equals 1 to x equals 3? So what you need to know about this is we're dealing with an xy coordinate plane. This is our y axis. And this is our x-axis, and then we have this shape. And what they're wanting us to determine is what's called the rate of change. Rate of change is just a fancy way of saying slope. So what we're actually looking at here is the slope of what's going on here. The only difference is that with a figure like this, we don't really think of it as slope, because slope is usually for what's called a linear function, which means that's when we have a straight line. In this case, we have something slightly different. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to look and see what happens when x is equal to 1. So I'm going to put my cursor right here over the 1, and that's going to be x is equal to 1, and I'm going to go up, and I'm going to see where the line hits the y-axis. And it would hit the y-axis at 4. So my coordinates that I have so far for this, let me go to my correct, here we go. The coordinates that I have for this so far would be 1 and 4. Because when the x is at 1, the y is at 4. So the second one that I'm looking at is what happens when x is at 3. So I'm going to take my cursor over to the 3, and now you'll notice that the line is down here. So whenever I am at the 3, if you'll look, it's when you're at -4. Okay, so my second set of values is going to be 3 and -4. So those are the two coordinates that I have to deal with. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to establish the rate of change from this dot to this dot. So to be able to figure that out, you have to use the slope formula, even though we're not actually finding slope. So what the slope formula is, I want you to look at this part right here. Slope is rise over run. Whenever you're dealing with linear equations, your slope is the amount of change that takes place on the rise and the run from one point to another. And to figure that out, you use this formula right here. You take the second y and subtract the first y from it, and then you divide it by the second x with the first x subtracted from it. So I'm going to take this formula and I'm going to put it back on our whiteboard. Go back to the whiteboard. Okay, so the formula is going to be m is equal to the second y, that's what this little 2 means, minus the first y over the second x minus the first x. So that's going to be our formula. So what we're going to do now is we're going to just add these things in. So our second y is -4, and we're going to subtract our first y, which is a +4. So we're going to have -4 minus 4, and then we're going to take our second x, which is a 3, and we're going to subtract our first x, which is a 1. And now what we have is -4 minus 4 and 3 minus 1. At this point, you should know how to add and subtract your positives and negatives. If you don't, what happens is, this is a number line, and it's not the best number line ever, but let's say that this is the -4 right here. This is -5, -6, -7, -8, -9. I'm just going to draw in the last two of those. Okay, so on our number line, what we're going to do is we're going to start at the -4, because that's our first number, and since we're subtracting, we're going to move, oops, to the left. So we're going to go to the left 1, 2, 3, 4 places, and our ending number would be -8. So our top number is going to be -8, and our bottom number is 3 minus 1, which is 2. Now we're going to divide, because remember, fractions are division problems. So we're going to divide, and when you divide a negative by a positive, you get a negative as the answer. -8 divided by 2 is going to give us a -4. And -4 is going to be what this m is equal to, which is our rate of change, or our slope. So if you go back to the question, you'll see that -4 is the first answer that you can get. So with this one, this is another formula that you're going to have to memorize, because it's not one that comes on the formula sheet. So again, whenever you get your scratch paper and your test administrator says it's time to start the math test, as soon as they say that, I want you to go ahead and write on your scratch paper what the slope formula is. And the slope formula is m equals the second y minus the first y over the second x minus the first x. And that's when you have 2 points on your xy coordinates. You have to have 2 points to be able to do this, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out the distance, or the rate of change, between the point that's right here, and I know you can't see it because I can't really mark it, and the point that's right here, because that's where they want the rate of change to be. Okay? All right, next question. Now this is back to things that are on your formula sheet. What we're looking at here is the local newspaper is featuring news about the end of the school year on the front page, including articles on the senior prom, state champion track team, and retiring teachers. The following diagram shows the planned layout of the front page. Each layout area is either a rectangle or a combination of rectangles. So this is what the layout looks like. The question is, what percent of the front page is taken up by the prom story, including the prom photograph? So we're trying to figure out the percent of the picture that deals with this right here, the photo and the prom right here. And what you're gonna notice is if we were to take these lines out, we would end up with a big square right here in the middle. So that's the area that we're looking at. I'm gonna move to my other program real quick. I'm going to make this bigger so you can see it. Okay, so this is what the picture actually looks like, all right? And what we're looking at specifically on this picture is we are looking at this area that is in here, okay? All of that, not just what I circled, but that whole entire area. So what we want to figure out, first of all, is how much room we have for this entire front page. How big is the front page? And it tells us that the front page is 4 units by 5 units. Well, if you remember your area formula, area is going to be equal to the base times the height, or the length times the width, however you want to think of that. But either way you go, it's the across part by the up and down part, whichever way you want to think of it. So if we take these two guys and we multiply them together, we get area equals, I don't know why I keep drawing 2 lines there, we get area equals 20, okay, because 4 times 5 is 20. So that is the number of units that we have for this whole entire picture. Now what I'm going to do, you can do this a couple of different ways, but I'm going to show you the easy way to do this so that it doesn't take as much time, because time is an issue whenever it comes to the test. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at how they have the units marked off, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mark off everything, expanding this because it's just going to make things easier for me as I go. So you'll notice that I'm kind of just cutting this into pieces like you would a pizza, and just like this, because that's that line going down, This is this line going down. And I'm going to continue this for the whole rest of the picture. All right, I'm not going to count them, but if you were to count them, there would be 20 blocks. Trust me on that, because there's 4 across, 5 down. It's going to give you 20. How many blocks are taken up by the prom article and the photo? 4 are going to be taken up out of the 20. Now, if you looked at one of our previous videos, you saw that one of the things we were doing was what was called part to a whole. To figure out the percentage of something like this, you're going to take the part that you're looking at and you're going to divide it by the whole, okay? And that's going to give you a decimal number to help you figure things out, all right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to pull up our calculator. Always use the calculator for these small calculations here, because a lot of times when you get to a problem like this and it seems like it's something really simple, I want you to still use the calculator because you've got it right there. So you may as well use it, and it'll cut down on any problems you're having. So what we have now is when we divided 4 by 20, we ended up with a 0.2, okay? Now if you remember, when you're changing a decimal to a percent, what you're going to do is you're going to move that decimal 2 places to the right. I should put it right here, and you're going to add a percent sign. So in this case, we would have to add a 0 also, and then our percent sign. So these 4 areas right here will take up 20% of the whole entire front page. Now we're going to go back to our original problem, and the original problem says what percent of the front page is taken up by the prom story, including the prom photograph, and your answer is going to be A, 20%. Okay? Next question. This one is area again. So remember, the area formula is something that you're going to have whenever you're looking at your formula sheet. This is not something that you have to think up all your own, okay? So what we have is we have a rectangle where its side, each side of rectangle A is 5 times as long as the corresponding side of rectangle B, okay? So let me draw this out for you. Let's get a new page. So rectangle A, we're going to call this one B first of all. Okay, this is going to be B, and then A, we're going to pretend like that is what we need, but that's going to be A. Okay, so whatever your side is here, okay, whatever this is, actually let's call it width, okay, and let's call this one length. All right, whatever these two guys are, this one is going to be 5 times that. Okay, back to the problem. It says the area, each side of rectangle A is 5 times as long as each corresponding side of rectangle B. So that doesn't mean that it's plus 5. It means that it is 5 times as long. So we're multiplying. All right, so the question is, how much bigger is this than this? All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to compare the two of them. All right, if we compare these two, we have length times width, which will give us a specific number. But over here, if we take these two and we multiply them out, what we end up with is 5 times the width times 5 times the length. So what's going to end up happening there is that this is actually going to be, if you look at your answers, let's find number 12. Number 12 is D. Let me go back up to number 12 for you. You can always compare your answer to what they got. So the answer is D. A lot of you would maybe think it was A, but what's actually going to happen is when we multiply these two out, we would end up with 25 length times width. And how does that compare to a regular length times width? We have 25 more of these than we have of these. So our answer is going to be 25 because it's 25 times bigger than this one. These are obviously not drawn to scale, but if they were, this one, you would be able to fit 25 of these small ones into this larger one. So those are questions 10